priest looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not welcome here." So I stood outside the church doors during my brother's wedding and played a recording of the priest begging my father to pay off his gambling debt with church funds. I arrived 10 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, dressed in a tailored black suit that didn't whisper grief, but declared intent. My shoes tapped cleanly against the cobblestones outside St. Elidor's, each step a quiet challenge, measured, deliberate. The church loomed ahead like it always had when I was a boy, massive, arrogant, and convinced of its own righteousness. But I wasn't here for a sermon. I only wanted a seat at my own brother's wedding, even if it was in the shadows of the back pew. I didn't come to make trouble. That part came later. The moment I reached the church steps, he appeared. Father Ambrose, the man with a voice like velvet over gravel and eyes that used to smile when he saw my family walk through those wooden doors. But not today. Today, he squared his shoulders as if bracing for a storm, even though the sky above was clear. His cassock clung to him in the heat, but his gaze was colder than December stone. He didn't greet me, didn't ask how I was or offer even the most brittle of pleasantries. He just looked at me, really looked, and said with a calm so rehearsed it felt mechanical, "You're not welcome here." That was it. 4 words, no embellishment, the kind of sentence you don't mistake for a misunderstanding. There was no room for a question or a plea. I wasn't being asked to step aside. I was being erased. I held his gaze unmoved. My heart didn't stutter, though the sting behind my ribs tightened. I wasn't surprised. Not after everything. But I also wasn't going to be dismissed this time. I had let too many lies slide. This was different. This was my brother's wedding, and I had come prepared. 6 months earlier, I'd found Father Ambrose in our kitchen, late at night, his collar undone, sweat on his brow, his fingers trembling against a chipped mug. My father, stoic as ever, sat across from him, silent, but not unaware. The priest had come in desperation, not fellowship. His voice cracked when he spoke, his hands twitching like the weight of confession had broken something inside him. "I need 60,000, he had said. It's gone too far. I can't fix it alone." There was a pause, followed by something worse than silence. "The church account, it's just sitting there. Just alone. I'll put it back." I had been standing in the hallway out of sight, phone in hand. I recorded every word, not because I planned to use it, but because some truths demand proof. My father never answered. The next day he wrote a check. And the subject was buried beneath layers of unspoken shame, but it never left me. Now, standing outside the church, I watched guests glide by in pressed suits and pastel dresses, their chatter light and oblivious. Smiles painted like stage makeup. No one saw the rot behind the stained glass. They moved past me as though I was invisible, because he had made me invisible. But I had something that would cut through all the rehearsed laughter and polished lies. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small portable speaker. I had charged it fully the night before, tested the file, checked the volume, twice. The recording was unedited, uncut, his voice in all its trembling honesty. I positioned myself just outside the open church doors. Music was playing faintly from inside, something soft and romantic, the kind of song meant to swell hearts and soothe nerves. I let it play for a few more seconds, long enough for the ushers to finish seating the last guests. Then I pressed play. His voice came through clean, raw. "Please, I need 60,000. I'm in deep. I've tried everything. The account, no one checks it. We'll return it before anyone notices." It was like striking a bell in a silent room. The music inside faltered. Conversations cut off mid-laugh. I didn't stop the playback. I let every word ring out. My arm stayed steady. My face gave nothing away. There was a pause in the recording, a stifled sob. Then, "If this gets out, I lose everything." From within the church, gasps rippled like wind through dry leaves. The sound wasn't just heard, it was felt. A weight dropped on every guest's shoulders. Heads turned toward the entrance. The organist stood frozen. Someone's phone slipped from their hands and clattered to the floor. A child asked what was happening, and the mother shushed him without knowing what to say. Then came the final words from the recording. "You're the only one I can ask, Richard, please, just this once. Help me cover it before it destroys me." My father's name, spoken aloud, inside the church, by the same man who had just told me I didn't belong. I turned off the speaker. No one moved. The silence was absolute. Inside, Father Ambrose stood at the altar, pale as the marble statues behind him. His hands were clasped, but not in prayer. I didn't step in. I didn't have to. The truth had already walked through the doors without me. The moment the recording ended, the weight of exposed truth settled over the church like dust in a forgotten crypt. I didn't move from my place just outside the doors. I didn't need to step in. I had already entered without crossing the threshold. My silence now said more than any outburst could have. The voice that had once trembled in my father's kitchen now rang louder than the bells in the steeple. Every guest had heard it. Every breath inside was held in a strange, stunned reverence. Not for holiness, but for clarity. Inside, Father Ambrose hadn't moved. His face no longer carried the rehearsed calm he wore when he turned me away. Instead, it bore the expression of a man who'd been stripped of every layer of control. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His authority, the thing that once clothed him heavier than the vestments he wore, now lay in pieces on the polished floor. My brother Mark stood at the front with his bride. Her hand hovered mid-air, inches from his arm. She hadn't touched him since the recording started. He looked back, past the rows of stiffened guests, searching for me beyond the door. His expression wasn't anger. It wasn't confusion. It was something deeper. The kind of look people wear when a foundation they trusted without question suddenly gives way beneath their feet. Then, in that frozen moment, my father stood up. He didn't look at the priest. He didn't glance toward me. He faced the crowd, people he'd known for years, business partners, neighbors, old friends. Some nodded slowly as if they'd suspected. Others shifted, uncomfortable, unsure if silence meant complicity. He said only this: "It's true." The words dropped sharp and final. No explanation, no justification, no request for understanding, just the truth, plain and stripped of any dignity. Then he sat back down. That broke the stillness. Murmurs swelled. The bride's parents leaned toward each other, whispering quickly. Someone near the front stood up and walked out without looking back. A few others followed, one by one. The organist, still seated, looked at Father Ambrose, waiting for a cue that never came. Then Mark walked down the aisle, slowly, deliberately. His eyes never left mine. When he reached me, he didn't speak immediately. He didn't shout or accuse. He looked tired, older than when I saw him last. "You could have told me," he said, voice quiet but steady. I nodded. "I could have, but you would have gone through with it anyway." He didn't deny it. He glanced back toward the church. "You didn't do this for me." "No," I said. "I did it because he told me I wasn't welcome in a place built on a lie. I wanted to be there for you. I would have sat in the back, not said a word." He studied me for a moment, then exhaled through his nose like he'd been holding the breath since childhood. "He baptized us. He buried Mom. He prayed over our house after the fire. And 6 months ago, he begged Dad to cover $60,000 he lost playing cards," I said flatly. "He called stealing from the church a loan. He put guilt into holy robes and hoped we wouldn't notice the shape underneath." Mark looked down at the ground, quiet for a long time. When he finally looked up again, he said, "We're not getting married today." I didn't ask if that was his choice or hers. He turned and walked back inside. I waited. There were more murmurs, chairs shifting, doors opening again as more guests left. Eventually, the bride emerged too, walking alone, heels silent on the stone path. Her bouquet was gone. She didn't look at me. Her expression was unreadable, not because she was hiding something, but because it looked like her mind had been erased and was still waiting to be rewritten. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I sat on the steps, watched clouds form, shift, and dissolve above the stained glass windows. People trickled out in small groups, avoiding my eyes, some holding onto coats and small purses like shields. The priest never emerged. Eventually Mark returned. His suit jacket was off, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He sat beside me, said nothing. Neither did I. After a while, he said, "What happens now?" "I don't know," I said, "but it's not going to be ignored anymore." He nodded. "Dad gave him the money." "I know. He never told me, I guess." He didn't want to embarrass the family. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he just couldn't admit it out loud, the same way Father Ambrose couldn't ask directly. Guilt grows better in silence. Mark leaned back, looked up at the sky. You think he'll be arrested? He should be, I said. He won't be, not unless someone presses it. Mark was quiet for a moment. Will you? No, I said. I'm not doing this to ruin him. I did it so he can't pretend anymore, so he doesn't get to judge anyone while hiding everything. He nodded again. Then, after a long pause, he said, He's already packed up his things. I looked at him. He said he'll step down. He's leaving the town. That part didn't surprise me. Men like Father Ambrose don't stay once their curtain drops. They find somewhere else, somewhere new, where people haven't heard the cracks in the performance yet. But this time the recording would follow him. Mark stood. Come by the house later. For dinner. I didn't respond at first. You're not mad at me? He asked. No, I said. You didn't lie to me. He did. He gave a tired smile, then walked off toward the parking lot. I watched him go, then stood and looked one last time at the heavy wooden doors of the church. Still open, still silent. The building would remain. The people would return. But something had changed. There was no going back to before. The fallout came fast. By the next morning, the recording had made its rounds. Someone had filmed it. Of course they had. The file spread through inboxes, group chats, and quiet corners of the community like water through cracked stone. The diocese released a brief statement by noon. Father Ambrose has submitted his resignation. An internal investigation is underway. That was all. No apology, no admission, just a reshuffling of the same deck. My father didn't speak much in the days that followed, but on the third night after the wedding, he sat beside me on the porch and handed me the envelope. Inside was the original check stub. He hadn't shredded it, hadn't burned it. He'd kept it, like a wound that never closed. I should have said no, he told me, but I didn't. I thought I was protecting something. You were, I said, but it wasn't the right thing. He didn't argue, just nodded slowly, then stood up and went back inside. The church appointed a temporary priest. Attendance dipped. The whispers grew quieter with time, but they never stopped completely. You don't erase betrayal from the air. You learn to breathe around it. Mark and his bride eventually rescheduled the wedding. Smaller, quieter, no cathedral. Just family, a few close friends, and a simple ceremony in our backyard. This time, I stood beside him, not as someone exposing secrets, but as someone who was finally seen. And Father Ambrose? He left without a word. No goodbye sermon, no farewell gathering. Just a vacancy and a voicemail that was disconnected within a week. Someone said he moved 3 towns over. Someone else said he left the state. I didn't care where. He'd already lost the one thing he had weaponized for so long, his silence. I deleted the recording a month later, not because I regretted it, but because it had done its work. Truth doesn't need to be repeated once it's understood. And as for the church, its doors still opened every Sunday, but now they no longer decided who was welcome.